We are here to learn about Oracle Task Manager and how Oracle Task Manager takes your old business processes to task. So we do actually have an in-house specialty where we came up with cool names for webinars. So I can't take credit for that. That's actually, I think, Robin Clatterbaugh's name, but it's a pretty cool name still. So let me go to the next slide. So this is my name, my original name for the presentation, which was Task Manager Basics in 50 minutes or less. Now we are actually looking into having a one-day hands-on workshop on Task Manager. So if that's something that you're interested in, please let us know by all means. It would actually kind of follow the example that I am using for the webinar. So just for safety's sake, I am going to stop my video now. Not that I'm not gorgeous, because I know I am, but I think that I just want to make certain that we don't have any bandwidth issues. So, all right, can you guys still see my screen, Brianna?
Yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so let me move on. So the normal disclaimers that these slides represent the work and opinions of the presenter and don't constitute official positions of Oracle or any other organization, probably including Interrel. The material has not been peer reviewed and should not be reproduced without written permission from Argano Interrel. And then lastly, just be aware that Oracle EPM Cloud changes every month. And that's a cool thing because that means that there are new features that are always being implemented. So there's always new things to learn. So I'm coming to you live from Tucson, Arizona, and I just really throw this in to make people jealous because Tucson is sunny 300 days a year, and right now it's 70 degrees. So not to torture anyone, this photo was taken maybe a mile from my house in the Saguaro National Monument, which is named after the weird cactus. And somebody actually published a book here with, you know, pictures of cacti and then little captions. So something to look for on Amazon or whatever. So about Argano Interrel, the main thing about this particular slide is that our mission is to leave the world a smarter place than we found it. And I hopefully really embrace that mission. I really like that about Interrel. We have a series of books. I forgot to put the slide in, but the books are called Look Smarter Than You Are with Hyperion Planning or with Financial Consolidation and Close Cloud. Excellent set of books. It's why I came to Interrel as an employee, so something to look into. We were awarded the 5-time EPM and Analytics Partner of the Year, which is kind of cool. And I can say that the people that I work with are all really, really smart. And then our Net Promoter Score is just kind of a neat thing to know about. So let's go in first of all to the Task Manager end user interface. And so the example that I'm showing is the example that we're going to use in the workshop, in the hands-on workshop. So it's a very simple example. It is a task schedule with 2 tasks. One is an enter data form task from FCC, and the other one is what they call an automated task where you're running consolidation, but from Task Manager rather than actually going into FCC and going to the rules card. So this particular list of tasks that you're seeing is from the schedule for the year 2022 for the period January, and you can see that in the filter at the top. And you'll notice there are 2 tasks. The first task is open with the assignee because the schedule itself is open and the start date of that task has passed. The second task, run consolidation, has a status of pending because when the schedule was created from a task template, that task was defined as having a predecessor task of the previous task. So if you're familiar with consolidation, you're aware that if you have subsidiary entities whose currency is different than that of their parent, translation happens as part of consolidation. So if there's no exchange rates, translation would fail, right? So you have to enter the exchange rates before you can run the consolidation process, whether or not you did it from Task Manager or not. So the Worklist tab displays an assignee's worklist of tasks to be performed for a period-specific task schedule for January of 2022. In addition to being able to view tasks from the Worklist tab in the task card, task assignees also receive email notifications. And I know that this always brings up the question, oh no, 1,000 emails. So over on the right-hand side, I have a picture of your preferences card that shows that you as a task assignee or as an end user can actually choose how often you want to receive notifications. So I used to be an eBusiness Suite instructor, and we had a similar product called Workflow, and it could send you endless notifications if you didn't have a way to control it. So we do thankfully have a way to control it. So the left-hand screenshot shows you a picture of what the email looks like. And notice that it's from a no reply address. And that's to kind of indicate don't reply because nobody's paying attention. And then there's a link, enter exchange rates, which would open the task the same way that you would see it if you went directly from Task Manager. Right, so one of the things that you can do in Task Manager is you can assign tasks to a team. Now, teams are not groups like what you think of in security. Teams are actually a list of people to whom you can assign a task. So if somebody is out on vacation, that someone else that's on the team can actually process the task for the entire team. So when you define a team, you define something called a primary user. And if you are the primary user on the team, what happens is it automatically gets assigned to you, but you can release it for someone else to take action on it. In the screenshot, you see there's a button that says release. And that button is because the user that I captured the screenshot as was the primary user on the team. And so if they just wanted somebody else to take action without specifying who else, they could just click the release button and then it would be available for everyone else to open up from their work list and click the claim button for them to work on it. Now, you do also have an option in the actions menu, depending upon your system settings, to reassign the task to another user, but you don't really need to do that because the task was assigned to a team. Now, this first task to enter exchange rates is a data form task, and it looks to the end user exactly the same as if they had accessed the task from a desktop card from within FCC, but you just save them all the clicks of logging into FCC and going to the card and opening it from there. And you can actually preset the point of view as well. But the user has the privileges to do whatever they would do in the data form. So they could change the point of view to make certain that they're actually entering exchange rates for the right period. This particular data form is in data entry mode. So they could either review the exchange rates that were loaded via data management, or they can just look at the exchange rates that are there. And you have the actions button, you have the data button and the format button, same as if you were actually in the task itself by navigating to it from a card in the desktop for FCC. But I should mention, and I'll mention several times, that Task Manager is definitely not limited to FCC, right? In terms of the tasks that can be performed, you can perform tasks from planning, EPM, profitability and cost management. Most of the EPM Cloud products have an integration, and eBusiness Suite has an integration. ERP Cloud also has integrations. So that's pretty slick. So when you're looking at the task, over on the right-hand side, there is a list of tabs. So the Properties tab displays the status of the task, the anticipated start and end dates based on what the administrator thought the task assignee could complete the task within, and then the actual end date, actual start date when the user opened up the task and started looking at it, and the actual end date when they're done, and the actual duration, right? Because you can estimate how long the task should take, and then you can see how long it really takes because there's some reports that will show you that. Right? Notice that I put a little red box around the task type to indicate that this is an enter form data task, because the other task, the run consolidation task, is what we call an automated task, where it actually runs a job from FCC or planning or whatever. All right, the next tab over on the right-hand side is the instructions tab, and that is instructions for the task. Now, the data form itself also has instructions, but if for some reason you need additional instructions, when viewing the data form for this task, all right, then you can actually have those instructions here. And if you squinted really hard, you could see that the task instructions specify that there's actually a separate form for override rates. So this is a form for entering rates for P&L accounts and balance sheet accounts, but then there's another form for historical rates for equity accounts. The workflow tab displays to the task assignee, the end user who's performing the task. It displays information about who the task assignee is, and it shows you, in this case, this task was assigned to the team, and I'm the primary user on the team, so I'm the one who's looking at it, and it got claimed automatically because I am the primary user. The task assignee can be an individual user or a team. You can also have backup users, but you don't really need that if you assign the task to a team. You can have approvers. You can have multiple levels of approvers. Sometimes that's overkill, sometimes it's not. In my example, I did not set up the task with an approver because that would be an extra slide. So I didn't do that, but it is possible, and we will do that in the hands-on workshop. The questions tab displays questions to be answered by the assignee or the approver. Now, the questions are defined by the task administrator, the person who builds the tasks. They can specify whether or not the question has to be answered or not, and who it has to be answered by. So does it have to be answered by the assignee or by the approver? And the answer types that are available are, they can enter a date, they can enter a number, they can enter text, they can answer yes or no, true or false, they can answer, they can choose a value from a list. Now, one thing about questions, which we discussed in the actual workshop, is that the answers to questions cannot really be used to determine whether or not you could submit the task or not, other than you can't submit the task if the answer to the question was required. But it's not really stored like a variable. There is another thing that we use called custom attributes that will do that. The comments tab allows the assignees and the approvers to enter comments and upload attachments, so any kind of supporting documentation like an Excel file. Task administrators also can create task rules in the task definition to require that the end user actually enter comments or add attachments. And if that's required, if they're entering in some information, they actually need to have supporting documentation like a link to the router's webpage where they got the exchange rates. They can actually add that as an attachment. You can limit the size of attachments because there is a little bit of a performance impact. And the task administrator can also define users that have a role called a viewer. And viewers cannot submit the task, but they can add attachments and they can add comments. They just can't submit the task. And they can't approve the task. Now, also on the right-hand side, there is a related tab, and this is one of the things I really like about Task Manager because it allows dependencies. So I mentioned that the run consolidation task, which is what you're looking at here, has a predecessor of the enter exchange rates task. Because why run consolidation if you know it's going to fail? Because there's no exchange rates. So this screenshot is of the run consolidation task. I clicked on the related tab and it shows that the enter exchange rates task is a predecessor. And the task administrator can specify that predecessor tasks have to either simply have started in order for the related task to be started, or they may have to have completed. In this example, the enter exchange rate task must be complete before the run consolidation task can be started, right? Because there's no point, again, in running consolidation if you don't have exchange rates. Now, the best thing about Task Manager, similar to Account Reconciliation Cloud, is you have endless history about everything that happened on that task. Now, in the History tab on the right-hand side, history is read from the bottom to the top. So the first thing that happened was the administrator changed the status of the task to open because they opened the schedule and the start date for the task was passed. So the task automatically changed to, the task status automatically changed to open with assignee. the assignee answered question 1, they added a comment, they submitted the task, and submitting the task effectively changed the status to closed, success, simply because there were no approvers on the task, right? So it's not like the train A user had to click another button to close the task. They submitted it, it changed to closed because there was no approver, right? If there was an approver, the status of the task would change to open with approver instead. Now, there's lots of reports that are available for documentation of tasks. There's also some dashboards that I'll show you in a minute. I like this report because it shows me exactly what's in the history. So it's the audit trail. It shows me everything that happened on that task. We have some compliance reports that show performance analysis by organizational unit. So we're doing pretty good. We had 2 tasks assigned. 2 of them were completed on time for 100%. There were no late tasks. I'm not certain what the completion is, and none of the tasks had approvals and nothing was rejected, which probably made the task assignee very happy. Also, as part of Task Manager, for every task, you can generate something called a report binder. And a report binder is not only a report, which is pretty cool in and of itself. So the report is shown on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side, you see all the history things that happened. But also on the bottom on the right-hand side, you see the zip file that gets created when you generate a report binder. And the zip file contains another folder inside it that contains all the attachments. So it's really a centralized repository, which means if you're a task assignee or you're the accounting manager, you don't have to go looking through, your desktop and through all the directories on your desktop or through all the directories on the shared drive to find where you put all the attachments. It's all right there inside the zip file, which is really slick. So I like that. Can you tell? All right. There are also 2 dashboards. There's a task overview dashboard, which gives you a pie chart. And the pie chart is blank because everything's complete. And then also a bar chart. If you click on a slice of the pie or you click on a section of the bar chart, it will open a list, and then you can open the tasks from the list and view their history. The compliance overview dashboard provides an overview of task performance. So how did you do? Were there bottlenecks? Were there tasks that always seem to be late? And there is something else called an alert that we don't really have time to talk about today, but alerts are a way of a task assignee asking for help from someone who's not a task assignee and is not a task approver, but you want to track the fact that, every month this person has to get their password reset, or every month they have to ask somebody to send them the file that they attach, right? So that's what alerts are. And we will do that in the one-day workshop. So let me continue. And I apologize. I did mean to say at the very beginning that we will hold questions until the end, but there should be time for questions. So let's talk briefly about how you build that task schedule. So what you do in Task Manager as the task administrator, first thing that you do is you can create those teams. So this is a team, it's called the X team. Patrick Stewart is not a member, unfortunately. But at the bottom of the screen, you see that the primary user is my train A user. And if I'm the primary user, then when a task is created for which I am the primary user of the team to which the task is assigned, it gets claimed automatically, but I can release it. Now, Task Manager also allows for creation of something called organizational units. That's actually optional. Really what it is it's a way for you to associate something called a holiday rule. So oddly enough, Canada has different holidays than we do in the US. So you might have a Canadian organization and you might have a US organization, and that organization can actually be attached to the task as a way of associating appropriate holidays, so that if, for example, you don't work on Christmas Day or you don't work on Independence Day, that you don't get held accountable for your task being late just because it's a holiday. So the holiday rule that's shown here shows you that for this organizational unit, the holiday rule has 2 holidays, New Year's Day and Independence Day. And this was just a small example and it fit the screen, which is why I don't have other holidays that most of us would celebrate. Right, so a template, so just for example, you don't want to have to create a list of all the tasks every single period because they're pretty much the same from one period to the other. So what you can do in Task Manager is you can create something called a template. And a template consists of 1 or more tasks that are regularly performed during your period close, right? So for eBusiness Suite, that might be running the Create Accounting concurrent program or running the journal posting program. For FCC, it might be running consolidation. For planning, it might be running a business rule, right? But it's always the same, so you create a template. And the template can reference an organizational unit, but it doesn't have to. And you can tell that from the screenshot because organizational unit doesn't have an asterisk. And the number of days before and the number of days after is just basically how long is the time frame within which the task should be completed for a particular period, for a period specific schedule that you would generate from the template. Now, when you create a task, you define task properties. So this task property screen is showing you the properties of the enter exchange rates task. Okay? And notice it says the source is the template and the task type is enter form data, which is why when I opened the task, you saw a data form. Now, task types, and this is the most important slide. Let me repeat that. This is the most important slide. So task types available in Task Manager include something called a basic task, which is just answer to these questions, enter some comments, tell me that you're done, because maybe it's something that Task Manager doesn't connect to. But for most of the EPM Cloud products, as well as other Oracle products like eBusiness Suite, on-prem or Cloud ERP, there are task types. So you have to establish a connection to that other system, but then you can choose task types from that other system. So the screenshots that I'm showing you here are just screenshots of task types from financial close and consolidation. But there are task types from data management, like running a data load rule. There are other task types in financial close, like opening journal periods, importing journals, importing data, managing journals, managing entity ownership of subsidiaries. So all of these are available. And what that does is it means that you can create a task so that a user doesn't ever need to log into the actual application. They do everything directly from Task Manager. Okay, so it's an easier interface. It saves them clicks, but it's also keeping track of what they do and how long it takes to do it. And, realistically, to help your users, whether or not they're having problems doing it because somebody else isn't doing what they need to do. And I apologize for the little noises. I think that might be Google in the background. So that might be Chrome sending me messages. So when you define a task as the task administrator, you can define task parameters. So the left-hand screenshot is task parameters for a data form task where you're telling it which data form you're going to reference in the task. And that is the enter exchange rates data form. On the right-hand side would be the parameters for the run consolidation task. And the parameters are exactly the same parameters that you would have to enter if you launch that program, the consolidate rule, if you launch that program from the run rules screen. And there is an option when you create a schedule for a specific period for you to override those parameters for each period. So if it's January of 2022, you're not going to be running consolidation for March of fiscal year 19, you're going to be running consolidation for January of 2022. So you can change that every time you generate a schedule for each period. The parameters for January would reference January, the parameters for February would reference February, and so on. Task instructions include instructions from the template. But if you have instructions that are specific to this task, as well as information about things that might prevent somebody from submitting the task, like you have to answer all the questions, you have to enter a comment, you have to load an attachment, you can put that in the instructions so that if somebody gets an error message, they know how to fix it because it's in the instructions. So again, each task can be assigned to a team or an individual user. On the left-hand side, I actually have in the workflow tab, this task was assigned to the period close team, which consists of multiple users, of which my user is one. Now, the right-hand side is for the automated task, and you can't really assign teams to an automated task. You have to assign a run as user that has the permission to run that particular program. So the consolidate rule has permissions. Not everybody can run consolidation, and being able to access running consolidation from Task Manager does not override the inherent security of the referenced application itself. Now, every task can have one or more questions to be answered by the task assignee. This is the question definition. You can enter a hopefully meaningful question. You can specify the type of answer. If you want to give the user a list of possible answers, which kind of ensures some consistency in how they answer the question, you can create a list. So as soon as you choose a type of list, then it lets you enter list values. You can specify which role has to answer that question, the assignee or the approver. And you can check the checkbox that specifies that the answer to the question is required. And if the user tries to submit the task without answering the question, they're going to get an error message. And individual tasks can be assigned to a task predecessor. And this is the predecessor tab of the task definition. And notice there's a condition that says finish to start. So what that means is I can't execute the run consolidation task until its predecessor, the enter exchange rates task, is finished, right? So it's not just the predecessor has to have been started, it has to be complete, right? So someone has to log in, enter the exchange rates, answer the questions, upload comments or upload attachments, enter comments if they're required, and click the submit button. The status of that predecessor task has to be complete, and then you can do the successor task. Now, this shows you a picture of a task rule. And a task rule, there's a bunch of different types of task rules. You can prevent submission of the task by the assignee. You can prevent approval of the task by the approver. You can auto submit the task. You can send an email if something happens. And then the rule can have criteria which determine whether or not the submission of the task is prevented. So on the left-hand side, you see the rule type is prevent task submission. You see the message that the assignee would see if they violated the criteria. And then on the right-hand side, you see the criteria, which is that the count of the comments is equal to 0, right? So if there's no comments, you're going to get a message that says you must enter at least one comment in order to submit the task. Now, again, one of the cool things about Task Manager is not only does it store a history of what happened when the task was being executed, it also stores a history that shows what changes were made to the definition of the task. So did the task administrator, did they add a question? Did they add a rule because people were always having problems forgetting to enter comments or forgetting to add attachments? So the left-hand side of the screen shows you the history tab of the task definition, but there's also an audit screen over on the right-hand side where you can run a report and you can say, show me all the actions that took place to modify the definition of the task. And if you squinted really hard, the very top one in that list of actions that took place on the enter exchange rates task was that we changed a value, and you see the old value and the new value. So that's pretty slick. History is everywhere. Now, I know that having seen everything up to this point, some of you are going, can we modify that in Excel? Because I love doing stuff in Excel. So the answer is, of course. So there are some mass update options directly in the screen where you view a list of task definitions. So for example, if you just need to update the preparer on a whole bunch of tasks, you can actually do that in the web interface. But you can also dump everything into Excel via an export, make your changes in Excel, and then re-upload the data, right? And that's still going to update the history of the task definition. So nice way to be able to manage things in Excel if you want. Notice this is the audit card in the tools cluster. And this is actually showing you the top record in the audit report shows you that the assignee was changed from the train A user to the X team. And that was actually done by exporting the task definition to Excel, updating in Excel, and then re-importing. So even if you make your changes in Excel, when you re-import, it actually creates an audit trail, which is really nice. So once you've got the template and it has all the tasks in it, what you need to do is you need to generate a period-specific task schedule. So you go into the template screen, you select the template from which you are going to generate a period-specific schedule, right? And you choose that template and you choose Create Schedule. There's also an option to validate, and validate basically just makes certain that in the template, all the tasks have assignees, right? Because why have a task if nobody's going to do it? So that's the validate option, but the Create Schedule option, you create the schedule, you specify the parameters. So what is the period for which you are creating the schedule? And in my example, I'm calling it November of 2019, but I'm actually, the day zero date is 20 of 21. And that's just a weird thing that we do for a class. In the lower right-hand corner, you see there's a tab called Override Parameters. I don't have a screenshot of it, but that is where you could say, oh, I'm generating a schedule for November of 2021. So, gee, I want to change the parameters for the run consolidation task to be consolidating November of 2021 and not November of 2019. And you can do that for all tasks that have some parameter that needs to be overridden every period with the appropriate parameters for that period. And once you have created the schedule, you need to change its status to open. Once you change the status of the schedule to open, then any tasks that belong to that schedule for the specific period whose start date is in the past, their status will change to open with prepare. But let's say that you have a task whose start date is like January 1st, right? And or let's say you have a task whose start date is January 15th. Setting the schedule to open is not really going to matter if it's not January 15th. The task itself won't change its status until January 15th. So the scheduled task of the task card displays tasks for the chosen schedule. So in the schedule shown, you see the two tasks that I had in my template. The first task, the enter exchange rates task, has a status of open because the schedule has a status of open and the start date of the task has passed. The run consolidation task has a status of pending, excuse me, because its predecessor, which is the enter exchange rates task, has not yet been submitted, so it can't start. Excuse me. And I showed you this slide before. Open tasks will appear in the assignee's work list, but the assignee will also receive an email, and they will receive that email at whatever frequency that they defined in their preferences. Now, over on the left-hand side, you'll notice you actually see like two tasks, but then you see something called authorization required. And that's because for the run consolidation task, they don't actually need to open the task, they just need to authorize it. So there will be an authorization request in the work list that is just for authorization of that run consolidation task, because they don't really need to answer questions. They don't really need to enter comments. They just need to authorize running of the task, which will kick off the job in the appropriate application, which in this case would be FCC. So the assignee processes the task from the task screen, and they click the submit button to submit the task. Once they do that, the task status will change to closed if there are no approvers. In the history tab, you can read the actions taken on the task from the bottom up. So the status was changed to open with assignee. The user answered one question. They added one comment. They submitted the task, and the task status changed to closed because there was no approver. Now, I did also add to the screenshot what the error messages would look like. So the error message is always the same if there is a question that is required that you don't answer. The message is always going to say, you can't submit the task until you answer the questions, without the silly little voice, of course. The error message that they get if they violate the condition of the rule, which is that the comments can't be 0, that's actually a message that is defined by the task administrator. So that message says you must enter at least one comment in order to submit the task. Now, the audit card in the tools cluster can be used to review actions taken in the performance of a task, as well as actions taken to modify the definition of a task. So you see the same information here that you would see in the history tab. So you see everything from the bottom up, and you notice at the very top, it says the status changed from open to closed, right? And that's because the task assignee clicked the submit button and there were no approvers, so it closed. Now, the second task in this particular schedule was an automated task. And an automated task for FCC might be run consolidation, run translation, generate a report, post journals. Well, you don't necessarily need to go over into the application to do that. You just need to authorize having the job run. So you would get an authorization request. And notice in the screenshot on the left-hand side, I've changed the filter to say, show me only tasks of type authorization request. But you'd also get an email, and you can actually authorize execution of a task from your email notification. Right. But if you clicked on the authorization request over on the right-hand side, it opens up a window and you select the task that you are authorizing to run. You click the authorize button, you click the OK button, and that actually kicks off the task without you ever having to go into the application to run the task from a card. So automated tasks such as the run consolidation task, the actual job that gets submitted by you authorizing the task, appears in the application jobs card exactly the same way as it would if you launched it from the appropriate screen within FCC or planning or whatever, right? So you see the consolidate job ran because I authorized the consolidate job task. And in this slide, you see if you were to go back and look at the automated task after the job was complete, right? You never need to go into an automated task, but if you want to go look at it after to see whether or not it completed, you'll see on the left-hand side, the properties tab at the very bottom, it shows you messages. So this is the log message from the job. And it says list of entities to be considered for consolidation was the parent entity division B. And then over on the right-hand side, I have a screenshot of the parameters tab, which shows you what parameters were passed to that job. So when you consolidate, you run consolidation for a specific scenario, a specific year, a specific period, and a specific parent member in the entity dimension. The audit report for an automated task will show status changes to the task updated by the job actually running in the associated application, right? So you notice reading from bottom to top again, the task was authorized. It was changed from pending to open with assignee. And that was because the period status was changed to open. Once the predecessor task was complete and this task was authorized, task manager set the status of the task to processing because the job was running. Once the job was completed, the consolidation job basically talked back to task manager and said, hey, I'm done, right? And then the status changed to closed and completed with log messages, which showed up in the properties of the task itself. So the history of an automated task will display task completion when the associated job completes successfully. So just for informational purposes, it's not like if you went in the task right after you authorized it, that it would show complete right away, right? Because it could be that the job actually needs to complete running, and consolidation is much faster than it was before, but it might take a couple minutes to run. So once it's done, then it will update the history of the task itself to indicate that the job that was authorized by responding to the task has completed. So I apologize for talking really fast, but that was 50 slides in 50 minutes or less. So let me ask if there are any questions for our last 6 or 7 minutes here. And Brianna, you can still hear me, right?
I sure can.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that validation. Now, I believe that this, I'll just keep blathering away here, waiting to see if anybody has a question. If you would like to review this webinar, hopefully without the interruption parts, will be up on YouTube fairly soon. So you'll be able to go through it from there. You can certainly also ask questions of your InterRel consultants. And the main thing that I want to reiterate here about Task Manager is that Task Manager is not just for FCC. The example that I used was an FCC example with a data form task from FCC and a job task from FCC, but those are not your only options. I actually did a presentation at Open World, the last time Open World was live, I guess, and really want to reiterate that Task Manager is a centralized place for you to manage your period close schedule, whether or not those tasks happen in an EPM application or they happen in any other application. And you can still have basic tasks where all the user has to do is answer a question or add a comment or upload an attachment, and Task Manager has the benefit of being a centralized repository for you to keep all that information, even if those tasks are tasks you do manually in Excel, or even if those tasks are a task where you run the Create Accounting concurrent program in e-business suite. So again, Task Manager has the huge benefit of being a centralized repository, an easily searchable centralized repository for all of that information. So I don't have anything else. I think if we don't have any other questions, that you're free to send questions to InterRel. I think, Brianna, we have a way to give users access to send us questions. Is that correct?
Yes. So if you have any questions or if any questions come up later on, just email us at info@interrel.com and I will drop that in the chat. And we will most certainly direct those questions over to Andrea.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody very much, especially for your patience. I've had some interesting little interactions with my internet service provider, for which I apologize. Sometimes there are things you can do nothing about. So if nobody else has any questions, I think we're done. Remember that there are other webinars coming up, and I think there's a good possibility that we will have a hands-on course as well. So thanks so much for joining us.